I was desperate for money. Graduating college sounded like an accomplishment, but in reality, it just meant I had a useless degree and thousands of dollars in student debt. I spent months applying for jobs, but every rejection email felt like a slap in the face. My savings were nearly gone, and rent was due in 2 weeks. So, when I saw a Craigslist ad offering $50 an hour for a simple assistant job, I didn't hesitate. Assistant needed for research project. The post was brief. Some professor studying human behavior needed help with experiments. No experience necessary, just a willingness to follow instructions. It sounded easy enough, and the pay was more than decent. The only catch was that I had to come in for an in-person interview. The man I spoke with over the phone introduced himself as Dr. Keller. He had a calm, professional tone, the kind that made you instinctively trust him. He told me to meet him at an office space downtown. Nothing fancy, just a small rented room. I figured it was some kind of psychology study, maybe like those weird social experiments I read about in college. I didn't question it. I just needed the job. The office was in a mostly empty commercial building, one of those places that companies rented for short-term use. It was a bit out of the way, but I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut. When I arrived, Dr. Keller was already waiting. He was in his late 50s, well-dressed, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of authority. The room was minimal, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. No computers, no lab equipment, nothing that screamed research study. Still, he seemed professional enough. He shook my hand, asked me about my availability, and explained the job. "You'll be assisting in psychological studies," he said. "Simple tasks, nothing invasive." I nodded along, relieved that it wasn't some scam. But then he pulled out a black cloth. "As part of your assessment, I need you to wear this blindfold," he said. "It's a sensory deprivation test. Nothing dangerous, just a standard experiment." I hesitated. Something about it felt off. "Is this part of the job?" I asked. "Yes," he replied smoothly. "It's important to understand how people react to certain stimuli. If you're uncomfortable, I understand, but it's a required part of the assessment." I really needed the money. $50 an hour was too good to pass up, and I figured psychologists did weird tests all the time. So, against my better judgment, I put the blindfold on. The room fell into complete darkness. First, everything was normal. I could hear Dr. Keller moving around, the faint sound of paper shuffling. Then, I heard something else. A metallic clink, like a key turning in a lock. My stomach dropped. I reached up and yanked off the blindfold. Dr. Keller was gone. The door was locked. Panic surged through me as I rushed to the door, jiggling the handle. It didn't budge. My heart pounded as I turned back to the empty room, suddenly hyper-aware of how bare it was. That's when I noticed the duffel bag near the desk. It hadn't been there before. I unzipped it with shaking hands. Inside was a coil of rope, a roll of duct tape, and a large hunting knife. My vision blurred with panic. I was supposed to be part of a study. Not this. I banged on the door. "Hello? Let me out." No answer. My breaths turned shallow. I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. Of course, there wasn't. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I was losing my grip on time when I suddenly heard movement outside. Footsteps. Then the unmistakable sound of a key in the lock. I braced myself, gripping the knife from the duffel bag. The door swung open, and a man stood there. Young, early 20s, wide-eyed and pale. He looked as terrified as I felt. "You too?" he asked, voice shaking. I blinked. "What?" He stepped inside hesitantly, glancing around. I had an interview earlier. Same job. Same guy." He swallowed hard. "I woke up in a different room. I think I was out for hours." A cold chill spread through me. "Where's Keller?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I woke up alone, door locked. I found a key and got out. Then I heard you banging. We didn't waste time. We ran." The building was eerily empty, the hallways stretching in every direction. When we reached the lobby, there was no sign of Keller. It was like he had vanished. We called the police the moment we were outside. They arrived fast, combing through the building, but there was nothing. The office space was completely emptied out. No desk, no chairs, no duffel bag. Just an empty room with no sign that anyone had ever been there. The Craigslist post was gone. Deleted minutes after my interview began. Dr. Keller didn't exist. Or if he did, he had covered his tracks perfectly. I moved to the city with nothing but 2 suitcases and the promise of a new job. Finding an affordable apartment in a decent location felt impossible. So when I came across a Craigslist listing for a studio that was half the price of similar places, I jumped on it. The pictures looked great, small but clean, updated appliances, hardwood floors. It seemed too good to be true. The landlord, Mrs. Winslow, was an older woman, maybe in her 70s. She answered my email within an hour and told me she was looking to rent the place out immediately. She sounded sweet on the phone, almost like someone's grandmother, and even knocked a little off the security deposit when I told her I was new to the city. I toured the place that evening. It was even nicer in person, tucked in an old brick building on a quiet street. Felt like a steal. Mrs. Winslow didn't linger. She handed me the keys, said, "Welcome home, dear," and shuffled off before I could even ask about lease terms. Maybe it was the excitement of securing such a good deal, but I didn't think too hard about it. The first week was uneventful. I spent most of my time unpacking and settling in. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the apartment was surprisingly quiet for being in the city. But little things started to feel off. The first time I noticed something strange was when I woke up to find my closet door slightly open. I was sure I had shut it the night before, but I chalked it up to being tired. Then it happened again, and again. One night, I distinctly remembered closing the closet door, even tugging on it to make sure it latched. When I woke up, it was open by about 6 inches. A small thing, but unsettling. Then my bedroom door started doing the same thing. I always locked it before bed. It was a habit I had since childhood, but a few times I woke up to find it ajar. I started double-checking, triple-checking. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. New place, new environment, overactive imagination. That's all. But the final straw was the chair. One night, determined to prove to myself that nothing weird was happening, I wedged a chair under the closet doorknob before going to bed. In the morning, the chair was moved, just slightly, like someone had nudged it out of the way. My underwear drawer was cracked open, too. I felt my stomach drop. I don't know why, but I didn't immediately call the cops. Maybe because I didn't have any real proof that someone had been in my apartment. Maybe because I was afraid of finding out the truth. Instead, I bought a cheap security camera and hid it on a shelf, aimed directly at the closet. The next morning, I checked the footage. I nearly threw up. At around 3 a.m., the closet door creaked open. Slowly, deliberately. Then a man crawled out. He was gaunt, shirtless, his ribs visible even in the grainy footage. His hair was long, stringy, and matted. He moved unnaturally, like he hadn't used his limbs in a long time. He stood at the edge of my bed and just watched me, for minutes. Then, just as slowly, he crept back into the closet and closed the door behind him. I felt sick. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I grabbed my keys, ran out of the apartment, and called the police from my car. When the cops arrived, I refused to go back inside. I showed them the footage. One officer muttered, "Jesus Christ." Under his breath, they searched the apartment, starting with the closet. That's when they found it. At the back of the closet, behind a loose panel, was a hidden crawl space. It was small, barely enough room for someone to lie down in. Inside, they found an old, stained mattress, empty food wrappers, and a pile of random objects, trinkets, hair ties, pieces of clothing that didn't belong to me, things that probably belonged to the previous tenants. The cops questioned Mrs. Winslow, and at first she played dumb, said she had no idea there was a crawl space. But after some pressing, she admitted she knew about it. She swore up and down she never knew anyone was living in there, but I don't believe her. The police never found the man. They searched the entire building, but it was like he had vanished. I moved out that same day. I didn't even go back inside. I had the cops grab my essentials. Everything else I left behind. I didn't care. I've got a story that still messes with my head to this day. If you've ever picked up free furniture from Craigslist, this might make you think twice. So a few years ago, my roommate Tyler and I had just moved into a new apartment. We were both broke as hell, so most of our furniture came from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. One day, Tyler found a listing for a free couch. The post said, "Moving ASAP, must go today." No pictures, just a quick description. Large, grayish blue, comfortable. We figured, why not? We messaged the guy, and he responded almost immediately, giving us an address about 20 minutes away. When we got there, this middle-aged guy answered the door. He was tall, kinda skinny, with deep bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in a while. He thanked us repeatedly, saying he was moving out of state and needed to get rid of everything fast. The couch was already sitting in the driveway, so we never even had to go inside. It was ugly, like one of those old-school couches with giant armrests and a heavy wooden frame. It smelled a little musty, but nothing unbearable. Free is free, right? We loaded it into the truck and took it home. The first night, we didn't think much of it. We plopped it down in the living room, grabbed some beers, and played video games. But after a while, we started noticing this weird smell. Not super strong, but definitely there. Kinda sour, kinda rotten. Tyler said it was probably just old fabric or maybe cat pee. We sprayed it down with Febreze and moved on. By the third day, though, the smell got worse. Like way worse. It was this thick, putrid stink that seemed to come and go in waves. I checked under the cushions, in the cracks, even lifted it to see if something was stuck underneath. Nothing. Dude, what if something died in there? Tyler joked. I laughed, but the thought lodged in my brain. That night, I dreamed about maggots crawling out of the seams of the couch. When I woke up, the first thing I smelled was that god-awful stench. I decided enough was enough. We tipped the couch onto its back, and I noticed something odd. The bottom lining was sagging slightly, like it had been cut and restapled. "Okay, that's sketchy," Tyler muttered. I grabbed a box cutter and carefully sliced through the fabric. The second I pulled it back, the smell hit us full force. My stomach clenched, and I gagged as this wave of hot, rotten air burst out. Inside, stuffed into the hollowed-out base of the couch, was something wrapped in layers of plastic bags. Tyler and I just stared at each other. My hands were shaking as I reached out and peeled back the first layer. The plastic was greasy, damp. When I finally got a good look, I recoiled so hard I fell backward. It was a human forearm. The skin was dark, almost leathery, and the fingers were curled slightly. The nails were painted a pale pink, chipped in places. I remember every little detail because my brain just froze, like it couldn't process what I was seeing. Tyler bolted to the bathroom and threw up. I scrambled for my phone and called 911, barely able to get the words out. The police arrived within minutes, and our apartment became a crime scene. After an agonizing few hours of questioning, they told us the remains belonged to a missing woman from a neighboring state. But here's where it gets even more screwed up. The guy who gave us the couch, he never lived at that house. The actual homeowners had been on vacation. A neighbor's security camera caught him unloading the couch from a van and driving away. The police ran the plates, but they were stolen. He was never caught. I was broke, like ramen for every meal, ignoring my rent notices broke. So when I saw a last-minute babysitting gig on Craigslist offering double the normal rate, I didn't even think twice. The ad was simple: one-night job, baby already asleep, just need someone to stay in the house until the parents got home. Easy money. The couple who answered the door looked normal enough. Late 30s, well-dressed but a little frazzled, like they were in a hurry. The woman, Claire, thanked me over and over for coming last minute, while her husband, Mark, handed me the cash up front. The baby's already down, Claire said. You shouldn't have to do anything. Just relax. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. We'll be back around 1. Sounded easy enough. They left in a rush and I locked the door behind them. The house was big, but weirdly empty, like staged. There was furniture, sure, but no personal touches. No shoes by the door, no clutter, no stray toys lying around even though they supposedly had a baby. I shrugged it off. Rich people liked their houses looking like museums. I settled onto the couch and scrolled through my phone. Hours passed. The baby monitor sat silent on the coffee table. I almost forgot I was supposed to be babysitting. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A soft scratching noise coming from the baby's room upstairs. I grabbed the monitor. The screen was black. The thing was on, but it wasn't showing anything. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was broken? I turned the volume up all the way. Silence. The scratching continued. I told myself it was probably nothing. A tree branch against the window. Maybe a pet I didn't know about. But something in my gut told me I needed to check. I made my way upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was dark except for a night light glowing from the nursery. The door was slightly open. I nudged it wider. The crib was empty. I froze. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. Where was the baby? I checked under the crib, in the closet, even behind the rocking chair. Nothing. No baby. No sign there had ever been one. I grabbed my phone and called Claire. Straight to voicemail. I tried Mark. Same thing. That's when I noticed the pictures on the walls. They weren't of Claire and Mark. The frames held photos of a different family. Smiling parents, 2 little kids, a golden retriever in some of them. No baby. No sign of the couple who had hired me. My breath hitched. My hands were ice cold. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I needed to get out. Now, I bolted down the stairs and grabbed my bag. As I reached for the front door, headlights swept across the windows. A car pulling into the driveway. A van. The same couple stepped out. Only this time they weren't smiling. I didn't wait. I sprinted to the back door, yanked it open, and ran. Jumped over the fence. Landed hard in the neighbor's yard and kept running, screaming for help. Lights flicked on in the nearby houses. A porch door swung open. A man in a bathrobe stepped out, confused. I didn't stop until I was on his porch, gasping, trying to explain. He called the cops. When they arrived, the van was gone. The house was empty, abandoned. No furniture. No signs of anyone ever living there. The family photos? Gone. The baby monitor I left on the coffee table? Gone. The crib? Gone. The officers took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. The house had been vacant for months. The owners were a retired couple who had moved across the country. No sign of forced entry, no proof the couple had ever been there. I tried to show them the Craigslist ad, but it had been deleted. The phone numbers I had? Disconnected. I swear, I'm never hiring someone off Craigslist again. Started when my car broke down on the side of the road. I was driving home late from work when the engine suddenly sputtered, and before I could even react, the whole thing just died. No warning lights, no strange noises beforehand, just complete silence. It was past 9 p.m., and I was stuck in a sketchy part of town with barely any streetlights around. I panicked for a bit, then did what any rational person would do. I pulled out my phone and searched for a mobile mechanic. Tow trucks were expensive, and I wasn't in the mood to wait hours for one to show up. That's when I found Steve. He had a simple Craigslist ad: mobile mechanic, cheap, fast, reliable. His number was listed, and when I called, he picked up on the first ring. He sounded friendly, maybe in his late 40s, and assured me he could be there within 20 minutes. True to his word, he arrived even faster than that. Steve was a stocky guy with thinning hair and grease-stained hands. He was wearing an old blue jumpsuit, and he carried himself like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He got to work immediately, popping the hood and fiddling with the engine while making small talk. He He asked me how my day was, what I did for work, if I lived nearby. I answered without thinking much of it. He seemed harmless enough. Within 30 minutes, my car was running again. "Just a minor issue with the ignition coil," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Shouldn't give you any more problems." Relieved, I thanked him and asked how much I owed. He shrugged and said, "Normally, I'd charge 100, but you seem nice. Let's say 70. I paid him in cash, thanked him again, and drove off. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, around 2 a.m., my car alarm started blaring. I jolted awake, heart pounding. My apartment complex was usually quiet, and I'd never had any issues with my car before. I rushed to the window and looked down into the parking lot, but I didn't see anyone near my car. Figuring it was just a fluke, I grabbed my keys and turned the alarm off. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. At first, I thought maybe my battery was acting up, but that theory went out the window when I started getting texts from an unknown number. "Saw you driving today. Be careful on the roads." My stomach dropped. At first, I thought it was some spam message, maybe a wrong number. But then another one came in. "Nice red sweater. Looks good on you." I had worn a red sweater that day. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands shaking. I had no idea who this was or how they had my number. Then suddenly it hit me. Steve. When I called him for the repair, I had given him my number. But why would he do this? He seemed normal, friendly even. I blocked the number immediately, thinking that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The messages kept coming, each from a different number. "Missed you at the coffee shop today. Pretty hair. You should wear it down more often." I felt sick. Someone was watching me, following me, but I never saw anyone suspicious. Never caught anyone lingering around my apartment. My friends told me to go to the police, but what could I even say? Some guy I barely knew was sending me creepy messages? I had no proof it was Steve. Then, a week later, while I was driving home, my car stalled. Same as before, no warning, no weird noises. Just dead. I managed to coast onto the shoulder of the road and turned on my hazards. My hands were shaking as I popped the hood, more out of desperation than anything else. I didn't know the first thing about engines, but when I looked inside, I immediately knew something was wrong. Several wires were cut. Deliberately, I stumbled back, my breath coming in short gasps. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone wanted me stranded. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see who it was. Instead, I bolted for my car, locking myself inside and fumbling for my phone. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to call 911. "I need help," I gasped. "Someone's following me." The dispatcher kept me on the line while I waited. I didn't look out the windows. I didn't want to see, but I could feel it. Someone was there, watching, waiting. The longest 10 minutes of my life passed before I saw the flashing red and blue lights. 2 officers got out and searched the area, and they found him. Steve was hiding in the bushes nearby, holding a wrench. When they arrested him, they found something even worse. A tracking device. He had installed it under my car when he fixed it. He had been following me the entire time. If my car hadn't stalled that night, if I hadn't heard those footsteps, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. The police told me later that Steve had a record, restraining orders, harassment charges. He had done this before, but for some reason he was never locked up for long. I moved after that, changed my number, sold my car, and I will never, ever hire someone off Craigslist again.